Welcome to Spiritual Talk with Christy Godwin and Friends, an authentic podcast where we sit and discuss all things spiritual. Hello, beautiful souls. I am Christy Godwin. Please welcome to my podcast, Spiritual Talk with Christy Godwin and Friends. I have a beautiful soul here with me today. Her name is Heather Smith. Welcome, welcome.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor.
Now, I've known her for a while, and just the more I got to know her, the more beautiful and strong I realized she was. And I was talking to her the other day, and I realized that she was 7 years sober, which I knew that you had battled with an addiction, but I didn't realize, it had been such a time that you had been sober. And also, part of what she just mentioned was she's been on both sides of the addiction, where she was the one with the addiction, and then you also had a child who struggled with addiction.
Yeah.
So now let's go back to the beginning stages before because your drug of choice was alcohol.
Yes.
Correct. And did that start, how old were you when that started?
I was like almost 25, probably. It was after we had our last child, my fourth child, and I just randomly started drinking occasional beer here and there. And that's the thing is with my alcoholism, I drink only beer. So people be like, it's just beer. And I'm like, just beer nearly ruined my life. Okay. So it's never adjusted there, first of all. But I just started out occasionally having a beer here and there. And then it just escalated to where it was every day and more and more. And I don't know. I became a mom very, very young. And it was like, I never did no teenage stuff or all that. I really don't know where it came from. I mean, a lot of my family members or my grandparents, there was a lot of beer drinking in my family. When we had parties, they were keg parties. So it was kind of a thing,
So now
just,
you said that, I know that I don't know if you got married young, but I know you started having children young. I met her husband. He's absolutely fabulous. And he plays a big part in her sobriety. Just a
I
wonderful
like to
soul
think I
himself.
trained him well.
You did. No, he is. And if you see them together, he just has such a love for you. You can see it in his eyes. It's just a beautiful story. And so now when did you have your first child?
I actually met Matt, my husband, when I was 12, and I got pregnant when I was 14, and I had my first child, Kelsey, my daughter, at a month before I turned 15, got pregnant again, and had my first son a month before I turned 16. So I have two kids at the age of 15.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and I have to tell you, I've met some of her kids and they're beautiful souls themselves.
Oh, thank you.
And I think it's amazing that you were able to be a good parent, which
Yeah,
clearly you were
finally. No.
At such a young age. And so then now you didn't really drink in your early 20s. Did you socially drink? Did you casually drink a beer here and there?
Like hardly ever. Yeah, very seldom. So I don't know what it was. It was just like, I don't know. Like I've tried this. Sorry, but I tried smoking weed. Didn't work out for me. Okay, it freaks me out. I thought my heart was gonna explode and stuff, like crazy stuff. So I just started drinking a few beers just to relax at like the end of a day of laundry and kids and all that, and then it just sort of escalated. And then I ended up having two friends that became my very best friends. Our kids were all friends growing up together, and they drank with me. We'd have barbecues. We'd all be drinking. Us girls were the ones always drinking all the beer, and the guys like just hanging out. So it was just very, very different. And when I finally did get sober, those best friends that I thought would be there my whole life, like because I quit drinking, I don't know if that's the reason, but they just have nothing to do with me anymore, which is a really hard thing. But I mean, you find out who your true people are. For sure.
Do. I was at breakfast the other day with a couple of friends, and God always puts the people that need to be in your path. And so we were actually discussing my business, and she overheard it, and she was asking me about it. And I was talking about, just basically living her truth and empowering herself. And she teared up in this restaurant waiting on us and said that she was so lonely because she had been an alcoholic. She was coming out of addiction, and her old friends didn't really want to hang out with her anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she was feeling so lonely. And I can so see that, because at this point you're young, you have 4 children. how, I mean, it's so stressful at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You're just so tired. You still have so much to do. It's a never ending list. And so many times I've noticed as moms, we give our power, as females, we give our power away.
Yep, definitely.
And we look at what the society's expectation is for us. And it can be unspoken. Because like I've said, I've met your husband's sweet soul. And I'm not saying he did this to you at all. We
Yeah.
look at the way society in general is looking at us, not necessarily our partner,
Yeah.
just in general. We need to do it all. We need to have the perfect children. We need to cook the meals. We need to have the perfect house. We need to do all the things. And it's too much pressure. And I see women cracking. Their
Yeah.
infrastructure is cracking. And that's what I feel like was happening. And the beer was just taking the edge off.
Yes, definitely. Whenever I got, well, my path to getting sober wasn't like most people, I guess. I'm not really sure how most people's are. Everybody's is different. We just all want the same outcome. And sadly, a lot of people don't get the outcome that I have. So I'm super thankful every day for that. But whenever, the way it came about me getting sober is like, for years I drank, I mean, literally probably up to 30 beers a day, still completely functioning. In the beginning of my drinking, yeah, I would get blackout and say mean things and do mean, and it was awful to, and the next day I'd be like, I'm so sorry I said that, but I didn't even know what I was apologizing for because I couldn't remember it. But I would just say sorry. Then of course, when you say sorry and you continue to do the same things repeatedly, it's, are you really sorry? So whenever I got sober, I was I told him I can't quit drinking unless the doctor says I'm gonna die or something. And then I got the phone call that I was gonna die if I continued to drink. Like they said, you got about 6 months, year tops. And the doctor was literally begging me to come in and sit down so that I would know the extent of how serious it was. And I actually hung up on the doctor and
Mhm.
continued drinking, cleaning the house. And, I figured if I'm cleaning the house and going to all the sporting events and cooking the dinner, what's the problem? That's what I figured. And that's just not how it
Functioning alcoholic.
absolutely. Yes. So I didn't think it should be a problem. And then about after I told Matt about the phone call from my doctor, about a week later, I was continuing to drink. And he was like, okay, I can't let the kids watch you kill yourself anymore, which is exactly what you're doing. So your choice is to quit drinking or you have to leave. And of course, in my addiction, I had to leave. I left and I stayed in my car. And then just a couple days later, I got this phone call that I got a new probation officer. And that's when life changed real big.
Before you
My
get
last,
into the probation officer, I want to take a step back a little bit. And I want to know, when you're in the height of your addiction, you said 30 beers a day. So would you just wake up in the morning and start drinking?
oh yes, I would have to. Sadly, I would be like holding my cup of coffee and I'd tremble like this. And I remember my youngest child at the time being when I was still under my addiction. I'll never forget this because I mean it's one of the most humiliating feelings now. But I would hold my coffee in the morning waiting for the school bus with him, and I'd just be shaking and coffee going everywhere. And he'd be like, "Are you okay, mom?" And I was like, "Yeah, mommy's just sick." And the second my husband would leave for work and all my kids would go to school, I would have to get a beer in me just to function. My body was going through, like, starting to go through withdrawal. I could not function without it. And that's what was really scary because I knew I had a drinking problem. And like my probation officer would be like, that's a step I wish my sister could do. Like, a lot of people never even admit they have a problem. And so that's the first step. And I always knew I had a problem. I just didn't know how to fix it.
I want to go back to some of the things you said. And first of all, I want to thank you for being so brave, because I can imagine how many people this is going to resonate with and how many people are walking the path you did and they're afraid to admit it.
Yeah.
Because once you admit it, you kind of have to do something about it.
Yeah.
And it's very scary. So now, first, your family didn't know, like Matt didn't know, just
Oh, he had no idea the extent of my drinking at all. He every day we had a deal that he would get me a 6 pack when he came home from work, and that was all I drink. But I was literally drinking from the time I got up till he got home and just stashing away all the empty cans or whatever. And then he would buy me my 6 pack. And the bad thing is they were the 6 pack of the tall cans. They weren't just little. They were 16-ounce cans. And then when I would drink all of those, I'd be like, I need more beer. And I would just be hard to put up with unless he went and got me a beer. Like he doesn't really understand addiction because he's never had an addiction problem. So, I mean, he would get tired of me like moaning and groaning about, oh my gosh. So he'd go buy me a big bottle of beer just because I wouldn't shut up, really.
Right,
I
right.
mean, but I mean, even when I got sober I couldn't tell you, I'd be cleaning and find stashes of where I stashed cans of beer to have. And I mean, I would wake up in the middle of the night to pee and I would crack open a beer. It's sad and it's pathetic, but it's truth. And I feel it's very important for people like myself, that especially the ones still struggling out there, like, dude, you're so worth it. And I know it seems impossible. It seems impossible, but I've come to learn that nothing is impossible. Yeah,
I want
anybody can
to,
do it.
what you just said, you're so worth it. You're
Absolutely.
so worth it.
Yeah.
So when you were in the height of your addiction, did it just feel like an insurmountable problem, or did you and your soul feel like you weren't worth
Oh,
being
yeah.
sober?
Yeah. When I lived in my car for that week when Matt kicked me out, I just felt like, I mean, I work at the Branson Landing and I do all the landscaping. I bring beauty to the world. That's my job. That's what I do. And I take so much pride in it now that I'm sober. Those flowers mean so much more to me than just a flower. I envision them as like a struggling person. Like I try my hardest to keep them alive. And when they're looking gloomy, I talk to them and tell them like, no, don't you worry, we got this. Like we're gonna like I really put my sobriety into every aspect of my life, because there's just so much that people, when we struggle with our addiction, I literally felt like in that car, I'd watch all these families going by and I would know of like, I have this beautiful family. We own our own home. Like we have everything you could dream of. But then there's me. There's me in their life and they have to deal with all of my stuff. And all I could think is like, in this world, I feel like I'm in this huge world and I'm just this little tiny, and the world would just be better off and they would so be better off if I wasn't here. And then I got this new probation officer, and I don't know if because he wished his sister would admit that she had a problem as I did and get her help, but it was because of her that he cared so deeply. And he wanted to send me to prison. And I thought that's insane, because I can't be away from my kids. I can't be away from my family. I've never been away from them unless they're at like church camp when they're young. And so I begged him and begged him, like, please don't send me. And I said, I can't miss Thanksgiving and Christmas with my family like this. I begged for hours crying. And he said, you're going to miss this one or you're going to miss them all. Because he knew I was just going to keep drinking. And I was like, anything but prison. But I went to treatment in prison. And in prison, when you say we give like us women, we feel like there's so much we got to do and so much that people look at. And in prison, I realized, and it's sad that it took that, but I realized I got there and the counselor's asking me, like, so who is Heather? And I'm like, well, I'm Kelsey, Matthew, Zach, and Luke's mom. I'm Matt's wife. I'm Michelle's daughter. And they're like, no, but who is Heather? And I was like, oh my gosh, I've been so worried about being all of those roles in this life that I haven't taken time to know me. And they did this thing called mirror confronts, which to most people is probably crazy. At the time, I thought it was crazy. And they made me go in the bathroom and look at myself in the mirror. And they said, don't look at your hair or your face, like look into your soul and say that you love yourself. And I could not do it. I cried like, why you want me to lie to myself? And they're like, so you don't even love yourself. And by the time I got through those months in prison, I was doing mirror confronts with new girls coming in and helping them. And it was in prison where I found that I'm not just their mom and their wife and their daughter. I'm Heather. I'm a person. Like there's more to me than just that. And that's been life changing for me, because I do as a mom, we always want to make sure our kids have everything and do it,
Right.
but it's very important that we do things for ourselves. And the hardest part about my recovery, I feel like for some people probably be the same, is the forgiving yourself, because
Oh, yes.
thankfully my kids have forgiven me. We've talked about humiliating, terrible things that I've done. I've discussed it. And that's a very hard thing, is taking accountability and making amends. Hard thing. But to actually forgive yourself and love yourself, that
Mhm.
was one of the hardest things I've ever done.
So, Heather, I want to talk a little bit about that. What you said when you had to look in the mirror, as a life coach, I call that, it's called mirror work. And I actually put a TikTok out the other day about that. And I was telling people that I want each and every one of you to go look in the mirror and this is what I want you to say. And it was in response to someone who had posted on my page. And I could just, tell that she was in a tremendous amount of pain. And I can't tell you how many people have messaged me saying, I can't do it. I can't do it.
Yeah.
As women, and it's not just women. I'm not going to say just women, but I see it a lot because of who I work with. We give away our power.
Mhm.
And especially I've noticed right now in the, where we are, women are starting to stand, see themselves for the individuals they are, to stand in their divine feminine power. And I'm not talking about power lording over someone, but how you were talking about feeling insignificant, to let everyone know that you belong here. You have a
Yeah.
part here. I mean, look at your beautiful children. But when you were talking about how you felt like they'd be better off without you, of course, I'm a psychic medium. I bring through a lot of spirits, a lot of them who've been responsible for their own passing, either deliberately or like if you had passed from your addiction and someone in your family came to me for a reading and you stepped up, I would say, oh, she's showing me that she's responsible for her own passing
Yeah.
because you would have basically drank yourself to death, but you wouldn't have really done it on purpose.
Right.
That
Yeah.
makes sense. I've been through
Yeah.
a lot of spirits like that. They felt insignificant. They
Yeah.
felt powerless to change their path. They felt
Yeah.
powerless to take control. And it is so beautiful that you have been able to stand and take accountability and face how you feel guilty. Like I look at you and I am just so proud and impressed of how powerful you are. And you look at your past and all you can see is the mistakes. Yes, you have made, you've come to
Yeah.
terms with it. But how would you say that you were able to handle that guilt? Because I see that is a huge factor of people going back into addiction, because when they start coming out and being sober, they're looking at the destruction they left behind them. And instead of being proud of where they stand, they're just more
Right.
guilty. And then they want to appease that guilt. So they fall back into addiction. So what was it
Yeah.
for you that made you powerful enough to do that?
I feel like the first time I shared my story was with a very small group, and I just wanted to, like I said, put all the negative to it too. I don't want people to just see the sobriety part of me. Like I've been through these things, and I've learned from hearing other people's story when they admit to things they've done. I'm like, oh my God, that's so me. Like I can relate to that. Like I think it's just really important that we share all of that so that other people out there struggling realize like, yeah, you made dumb mistakes. We've all made mistakes, but you can get past that, and to share those bad parts that like we got to forgive ourselves for those. And that's what I'm saying. That was the hardest thing for me is I some days I will struggle with it and I will go to one of my kids and be like, I can't believe I ever did that, and they're like, it was a long time ago. It's not you anymore, mom. Like, and to have that. And some people might not have the big family that I have or whatever, but when you go to share your story, I think that's just one of the most important things is making sure that you tell it all. Don't sugarcoat any of it because all those struggling people are out there right now are feeling ashamed and feeling like they're worthless and you burnt every bridge. Trust me, I've been there. I've been alone and felt like there's no point in going on. And I felt like powerless. I felt like I might as well just give up. I'd be better off dead. And it's not true. It's not. There's so many people out there that love them and care about them and want the best for them. And as having a daughter that was in addiction myself, I know how hard it is when you have a family member that you love so dearly, more than anything, and you have to burn the bridges. Like every bridge was burnt, and my daughter was homeless because I couldn't let her be here around the other kids. I couldn't. She was making choices that kept her out there, just like I was making choices that Matt kicked me out. Like it's called
Mhm.
tough love. And sadly, there was a time that I thought she will never forgive me for this. But whenever we were both sober together, the first 7 months of my sobriety, and we have a very close family. And one of my uncles actually lived with me growing up, one of my mom's brothers. And then whenever I kicked my daughter out, she was homeless for a while and went to stay with my mom. And my uncle also lived there. So he's like a brother to her too. It's just that we're a very close family. And one day when I got sober, she actually was staying here with us, which meant so much to me. And she went to my mom's one night to go get some clothes from over there, and she called me just hysterical. And my uncle had just like fell over dead at 49 years old at the creek, and she was freaking out, having to meet the ambulance and just panicking. And whenever he was pronounced, I right then and there, I'm like, we got to make a pact that nothing, this cannot take us back to where we used to be. Can't do that. And
Good
we
for
made that
you.
pact.
Good for
And
you.
she was there and witnessed the entire thing, and she did relapse, and only for a couple months. And I don't want to say only because she had worked so hard for that sobriety. And that was a really big eye-opening for me, because when she relapsed, like, I was just devastated and I wanted to help her. And one of my sons said, well, at least I had my sister back for 7 months. And like, my heart shattered, because as their mother, I've tried to get sober for them. I've tried to get sober for my husband, for everybody else. I never did it for myself until this time. And that's a true thing, that you have to do it for yourself, because trying to do it because other people want you to do it isn't going to work. You have to want to do it
Absolutely.
for yourself. And I'm telling you, it's the greatest thing you'll ever do for yourself in your whole life. It is the best. But I thought she would never ever forgive me. When she had relapsed, she showed up at my house just in a really bad shape, and was telling me that people were out to get her. They're going to kill her, and she's my daughter, regardless of addiction or not. That's my daughter.
Right.
So I
Yeah.
wanted what was best for her. So I messaged a family member, and I'm like, we need to send the cops to my house. I want them to see what I see. She doesn't need to go to jail. She's having mental instabilities due to the things that she's been taking. And so they came, and thank God they saw what I saw, and they put her in the mental part of the hospital. And it took like 6 grown men. She's like 4'10", like, to hold her down and she was just screaming at me, I'll never forgive you. I'll never forgive you. No parent ever wants to have to call the police on their children. But I thought, you know what? I was crying when she was hollering these things repeatedly. And the nurse was like, are you okay? And I said, you know what? If this gets her the help she needs and she's alive and never speaks to me again, I'm fine with that.
Yes.
And I
Now,
literally thought I would never see her again. And she stayed in there. When she got out of that rehab, she's been sober every day since. She just celebrated 6 years clean, and she thanks me for doing that. So when
Heather,
we
real
have
quick,
people who,
I want you, for those of you listening to this on the podcast, you won't be able to see it, but if you're watching on my YouTube channel, you'll see it. I want you to show your shirt real quick for the camera.
oh, yes.
It says sobriety from 100 proof to living proof. I love that shirt.
It's a great
Now
gift.
you got it because you were 7 years sober just the other day. And
Yes, February 10th, I celebrated 7 years, and my husband got me this shirt, and then
congratulations.
I got a sober AF shirt. And I also got one that says no shame in my recovery game. So
I love, love, love that. Something that you said, Heather, that is so true and beautiful is that you have to get sober for yourself. No matter what it is, you
yeah.
have to do it for yourself. What was the point? What was the turning point where where it clicked in you? Can you say what it was? Was there a time? Was it gradual? What was that click?
Oh man, I don't know. I think it's just when I went to prison and I realized, like, there's more to me than just like my kids and my husband and these things, like that. I'm Heather and I'm a person, and I realized that I'm like, I want to be a better person for me. Like, I wanted to be better. And in turn,
Yes.
by doing so, it's definitely benefited my whole family but, and it was then that I also realized, like, holy crap, that's why they say do it for yourself. Because I've tried every other way, and it's just, there's no way. And even my visions and the way I see things are so, so differently. And I wanted to tell the struggling people out there that, man, there's so many. And sadly, there's some people that I love so dearly in my family that have, it's crazy to me now, because I look at it and these are the people that were always hounding me. Like, are you drinking again? Are you, like, have you been drinking? How much have you had to drink? It's just constantly nagging me. And then I go to prison and I get out, and I cannot wait to see these family members. And when I see them, I'm absolutely just baffled, because they're all in addictions that I thought they would never be in. It just blows my mind. And in my 7 years, I can probably count on both my hands how often I've seen those family members, and that's, so the hope is that they find what I find. And it just baffles me. But I know when I got sober, I really thought, you think, oh, it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows, but that's not how it is. It's still life. and things don't happen.
Right. Yes, yes.
I really thought like, oh, life's gonna be so great now, But
Right, right,
it's
right.
honestly, life is what we make it. And the things that have happened in my life are things that you would see on TV and think that's never gonna happen to you. And things that my son just killed over dead at his school. My daughter who is recovering, when she started recovering, she's like, I wonder if I can't get pregnant. Maybe there's something wrong with me because she'd had the same boyfriends for years and nothing. And then when she got sober and she was asking that, she'd only been, so many months sober. And I said, we can go to the doctor and find out. But I just feel like, God's going to make it happen when you need it to happen. And clearly he didn't
Yes.
need it to happen yet. And then
Yes.
by the grace of God, the day we were going to find out if something was wrong with her, we found out she was pregnant. And we were like so excited and just over the moon. And then as a gift from a family member, we went and got a 4D ultrasound to find out the sex of the baby so that we could have a gender reveal party because who wants to wait the whole 20 weeks till the hospital does
That's
it,
just crazy how they're waiting all that time.
Exactly. Exactly. So we went and got it, and I knew the sex of the baby, and then we had the big gender reveal that same night. And then just a few days later, we got a letter in the mail saying that the doctor wants Kelsey to call because there's some imaging results she needs to discuss. And I was like, she hasn't even had an ultrasound there. So how would they have? So I was like, oh no. So she calls, and then we find out that her baby had gastroschisis, which is actually kind of common. It's pretty common. The intestines, when the baby's abdominal wall forms, so it leaves a small opening. So the intestines are on the outside of the child while in the womb. So whenever he was to be born, he would have to stay in the NICU and his intestines would work their way back in. But we would have, I live in Branson, Missouri, so we would have like trips to Branson, Springfield, and all the way to St. Louis, 4 hours away for the whole pregnancy. And then, so we were just like, and we finally came to terms with like, okay, it's normal. It just look like he has a second belly button. And there was an appointment that we went to in St. Louis, and there was like a whole team of doctors because it was going to take a lot of people. And we got to sit down with all of them. And I said, so I have a question, like, because his intestines are like in the fluids and stuff, like this whole time, like that can't be good. And they said, that's a very good question. But you know what? You just have so much intestines that it'll be okay if we have to remove some, and he'll still be able to. There is a thing, like we have to tell you worst case scenario. There's a thing called short gut where so many of the intestines would have to be removed that literally the baby wouldn't be able to eat or any of that. So they said, but normally if we find that out during pregnancy, we would just recommend termination. Well, but so far everything was looking great. We were getting ultrasounds constantly. And then the day the baby was born, they said he's probably going to come out like not breathing. They'll have to, it's going to probably be hard. So the baby came early at 32 weeks, and we got to St. Louis, and they were going to try to keep him in. The heart rate went down. Anyway, he comes out, and there's barely any intestine, 2 pounds, 10 ounces. Barely any intestines on the outside. The doctors were so excited, telling me, Grandma, listen, barely any on the outside. You guys will be taking him home in no time. So they had to go in and do a surgery to remove the little bit of damaged ones that they saw. So we're waiting, just the happiest news because he was breathing on his own and everything. And then it was on May 18th. My daughter's birthday is May 19th, and she had him on May 18th. And they did this surgery, and she hadn't ate all day. So I went to go get her food, and she called me just hysterically crying to where I couldn't understand her. And I hear her say, do you remember what worst case scenario is? And I said, short gut. And I walked into her room right when I said, and she's like, yeah, it's basically that. It's vanishing. So his intestines literally just disintegrated. So he was born with the smallest amount of small intestines that they've seen. They said he wasn't going to live through the night. We had to go in and see it right away. He had all these cords and tubes. And when he lived through the night, I asked them, like, so what's the goals? What do we do? And they said, it's one day at a time with him because we really just don't know. They were baffled. And I said, well, then you gave him to the right family because that's exactly how we live our life. And the longest the child's lived with this condition, they said he'd never see his first birthday, his first Christmas. We lived in the NICU for 119 days, having to learn all of these things that seemed so overwhelming. It seemed impossible, but once again, it wasn't. Now it's just our normal. And the oldest the child's lived with this is just over 4 years old. And Sebastian, my grandson, will be 5 May 18th. So every day is a gift, and whether it's because of something like that or sobriety. Since I got sober, I literally, that is how I live my life. Today, even if you're having a bad day, be blessed to be having that day. Today is what you make of it, regardless of the bad things that's happened. You don't even want to know how my morning started out. But guess what? It's only going to go up from here. It's your choice to make it. And some days it seems like a struggle. Mentally, it's some days I'm like, I don't even want to get out of bed because some things that has happened just recently. And I tell myself, even if I do something productive today, just one thing, because I know there's people out there that feel the same way. It's like just one thing. Start
So
there.
Heather, you in that 7 years, or even when your grandson, so you were a couple years sober when your grandson was born.
Yeah.
Were you ever tempted were you ever angry? Like, here I got sober and now this is happening. Were you ever
Oh,
tempted to go back?
yeah. I want to say something, and it's odd that you asked this because I was going to tell you. When my uncle that I was talking about just killed over like that, I was at the landing just watering flowers like 4:30 in the morning, and I'm just baffled just thinking about this. And this was just around my 6-month mark, just 2 weeks before that. And I'm watering these flowers, and I thought, you know what, I could go get a beer, and my husband and kids will never know. And this has never happened to me before. Something in my head said, but you're gonna know. You're gonna know. And when my son just killed over at his school, he was shocked back to life by the defibrillator. He was airlifted to St. Louis, 4 hours from here, which is now where we take my grandson. And we got there, and I was just frustrated because, I mean, we were scared. We didn't know what was going on. And so many people were blowing up my phone. Remember your sobriety. Remember your sobriety. To the point of that night, my husband and the rest of the family would all go to hotel rooms because only one person could stay with Zach. And guess what? That was me.
Right, right.
So I was telling him, like, oh my God, my phone went off while me and him were just talking. And I said, I wish people would just stop with that. Like, the last thing I'm thinking about right now is drinking. And he looked at me and he said, yeah, mom, but a situation like that, most people would be thinking about the thing that makes them feel better. That's what they would be thinking about. So whoever's messaging you that, they really care. And it was then that it clicked to me, like, oh, you're so right. Like, most people will be like, this is a good excuse to go do this.
Yes.
So in my
Yes.
sobriety, I've learned that there's no such thing as a good excuse, because you can sit here and tell me half your family died, because trust me, I've been there since my addiction. Just the things I've been through is unbelievable. And next month is going to mark a 1 year thing that's something that I still struggle with. And I'm telling you right now, every time, and I tell my daughter this because, yeah, it's not fair that her son has this condition. It's not fair that my kids have this heart condition. And life isn't fair. And I remember my mom telling me that growing up. Oh man, was she right? But what I tell my daughter is, you know what? The devil had me too long. He took me from my family too long, and I'll be damned if he's getting me back. So that's him trying. That's him trying. He sees me doing good for the other side. And guess what? He's going to keep watching because I refuse. I refuse. I can't sit here and say that I'm never going to drink again, but I'm telling you right now, I'm not drinking again today. And when I wake up in the morning, I ask God, give me strength to not drink today. And at the end of the day, I'm thanking him for giving me that strength. And that's how I do my sobriety. A lot of people do it differently, but that's just what I do. I work on today, and I'll worry about tomorrow when it gets here.
Heather, I was gonna say, I love that. The fact that you're not looking at never. I'm not, that's too overwhelming. You're looking at today. Today, I am not drinking.
Yes.
And tomorrow when you wake up, today, I am not drinking.
Yes, absolutely.
Also, I love that. What was your exact words? It's nothing's ever an excuse. What did you say? What were your exact
There's no
words?
good excuse. There's
No
none.
good excuse.
No.
I love that. Now, did you go to AA, or are these things you learned in prison? Did you do it on your own?
Well, I've been to AA meetings and I love them, but no, and that's what a lot of people are different. Like, I have friends that are in recovery that they are all about their meetings. And I don't want to sound like a selfish person when I say this. Some people may take it the wrong way, but I feel like my addiction took too much time away from my family that I refuse to let my sobriety do the same. So I don't want to spend all my days out at these meetings, but I don't know how to explain it. it's just so different. The way I look at everything is so, so different. And I want every moment to be spent with the people that I love. That's they
Absolutely.
finally, like they say, they finally got their mom back, and I finally got my wife back. I remember my husband calling whenever I'd call him from prison, and he's like, I was just bawling like 2 weeks in. I'm like, there's no way I'm gonna make it in here. I don't know what to do. And he's like, you know what? You don't have a choice, babe. Maybe work on Heather. Find that my Heather, because I know she's in there somewhere. And I was like, I would get so mad when he'd say that in my addiction. Like, what are you talking about? I'm right here, you know?
Right, right.
But then a couple weeks later, when I called him, I was just excited, telling him about this had happened, and that. And he starts crying one day, and he's like, I was like, what's wrong? And he's like, it's my Heather. It's finally Heather. And
How
I
long
was
were
like,
you in prison?
only 5 months. Well, not only,
Only.
just yeah,
Right.
it was a
Oh, I
lifetime.
know there's people that have done a lot more time than that, but anytime, especially because, and I'm not saying that anyone deserve, we're not
Right,
here to debate who should be in prison and who wasn't,
right,
but you think of people being in prison of,
yeah,
murderers, people who
yeah,
rob, that type of thing.
yeah.
You were in there because, and I would have to unpack that a little bit, how I feel about, was there not an in treatment center that you could go to?
Well, my
Is
PO, yeah, he said
is
it's the
prison
best
the
treatment
only
program.
option that we
Oh,
have for
trust
hurting
me.
people?
Yeah, I begged and begged, and I went to this is how in prison, of course, I just think of stuff I see on TV, like, oh my
Right,
gosh.
right.
And it's
Exactly.
very
Same.
scary. Just the transport from county to the prison was like, I was so scared, what are we gonna walk into? And it's things I never want to, ugh, it's awful. When you get in there, I mean, it's humiliating. They strip you down in front of a room full of other women, strip us all down naked, literally pouring jugs, like big jugs of lice stuff all over us. We have to sit there naked with each other for 10 minutes, leave that on, and then they pretty much hose you down. That's how it starts in prison, okay?
Wow.
But I spent what they call on the yard is it, and I see it's sad. When I was in county, a lot of girls would be like, I'm a rollback, and I'm like, I don't know what that is. And they're like, that means I've been there before. So they were telling me like prison's way better than county and this and that. I'm just like, county's awful. I can't even imagine prison being better, but I get there and it's just
I'm
on the
sorry,
yard.
Heather, for just a moment. I can see you
I-
sitting there and you understand the words people are saying to you when they're talking about rollback and everything. But I see you sitting there saying, are y'all speaking English? Because what do these
yeah,
words even mean? What are y'all talking about? It was like a
yeah,
completely different world for you.
absolutely. It was just like a normal to them. That's what I was baffled by. And when I got into prison, you walk in and it's like, of course, there's guards with you, and there's a whole bunch. You're all shackled together. When they take you off the bus, they take you in there, and then you go through these gates. And on the other side of this building, you walk out this building, and I'm telling you, there's like surrounded this field, big, beautiful field with these different buildings here and there, and the big barbed wire fences, and all the walk past to this way and that way. And it's just overwhelming. And I spent 9 days on what they call the yard, which is pretty much, and this is sad because now I can see why girls do go back to prison a lot, because to them, it was baffling that I spoke to my children every day. It was baffling that when I got out, I was going to see my kids the day I got out. They thought that was crazy. But to me, I felt like it's crazy that they weren't. It's like
Right.
everybody's normal is different. None of us are the same. So the sobriety thing, it's different for everybody, but I just want everybody, no matter who you are or what it is, it can be done. It's not impossible. Like, it's up to you to do it. I'm telling you, it seems impossible, but you just take it one day at a time. But I spent 9 days on the yard, and it was just like freedom. We got to go outside to rec. We walked around ourselves, watching TV, doing whatever we want. But then after day 9, they sent me to the treatment building. Life changing. It was life changing. I walked into there, and when I walked in, all of these women were standing what they call in props, where their feet are apart, their hands are behind their back, and they're saying the quote that they did. And it was like, it's just like it's kind of like a cult when you first walked in. And me, I've gotten in trouble so many times for my smile. It's just I constantly smile. It's bad, and it's really bad because me and my kids and I have a gum disease. It's does this. Two of my kids already have full dentures, so I'm on my verge of getting there. But automatically I'm judged because people think it's from like drug use or something. But I can't not smile, And I went in there and they're like, "Are you happy to be here?" And I said, "No, I'm happy to
You
be
just,
here."
I know people like that. They have that nervous smile. That's the
Yeah,
way
it's
they,
just
yeah.
all the time. And I went in there and it was, you had to ask permission to use the bathroom. You had to ask permission to speak. You had to ask permission to enter a room. You did nothing without permission. Nothing. If you wanted breakfast, you got up at 3:30 in the morning for breakfast at 4. Classes started at 7. You were in classes all day until count. And whenever I say count at bedtime, they count you multiple times a day. But when you go to your room at like 9 something at night, they do count at 10. You're just exhausted from getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning. So a
Right.
lot of people fall asleep before count at 10. But if you are not awake at count, you can't, there's consequence. You don't sleep through count. And I remember when I first came home, I went to tell my youngest son goodnight. And I asked permission to come in his room. I said permission to enter, and he was like, "What?" And my husband like, "Babe," and I'm like, "Oh, it's habit. It's really scary, kind of, and crazy how it becomes our normal. That was my normal in there,
Right.
and I couldn't tell you probably months. I woke up in the middle of the night. Oh my God, did I miscount? Like things
Wow.
like that. It's crazy how that it took a lot to get back to like normal, to being on the outside,
Mhm.
because you don't realize the things you take for granted every single day. And it's not just the not seeing your family or being able to go out shopping or whatever, just like having a comb or a toothbrush, you know, or
Right.
getting to eat when you're hungry because they give you these meals at 3 a.m. I mean, dinner is literally like by 4 p.m. and you're up till 10 with all these classes. And it's just such a different thing. And even now, like today when I went to Starbucks, I'm like, I want to get a Starbucks before I get a talk to Christy. I was like, just
What a
like,
treat, right? Just to have the
yes,
ability to
yes,
get out
because
there.
I walk out and like you were talking about the weather there, like I'm like, it's so windy when I walked out. It was so cold. And I was like, all I could think is, but at least I'm here getting it, in prison, I just be locked up and not knowing nothing, like just to walk outside when I want, like the things that we really take for granted it's baffling to me. Like
And
it's life
Heather,
changing.
I love how you several times have said and given permission to people for their sobriety to be what they make it,
Yes.
but that everyone can do it. And I want everyone listening to please know that and it's a lot like when I teach, because I've been a teacher for 30 something
Yeah.
years. I teach people
Yeah.
everything. Now I teach psychic medium, but before I taught other things at the college
Yeah.
level. And I was like, I will give you, several different ways to understand this knowledge. You pick what works for you.
Yeah. Mhm.
Everyone is different, but I want
Yes.
everyone to know you have a place on this earth. And if you don't believe me,
Oh yeah.
have Heather, who that girl has been through some crap.
Oh man. A lot.
And I so much love this success story. I have seen her family. I have met her family. They are beautiful. They all love and support her. Now, I do want to ask, did you have anyone when you came out, when you walked into sobriety and you went back and started apologizing for people, did you ever have anyone that didn't accept your apology and not forgive you?
Nope. Nope. I never did have that. I do have one of my sons that struggles because I think mostly, and which is very understandable, is because I'd let them down so many times. Like, yeah, she'll say that she's gonna get sober again.
Right.
But like literally nobody thought it was gonna stick, you know what? But I felt different and I was like, yeah, of course they're gonna doubt me. But
Right.
and even to this
Absolutely.
day, I have a family member that asked me like 2 months ago, like, so have you seriously not had a drink? I won't tell anybody. And I'm like, you know what? The man upstairs and myself now. And I mean, I throw the Lord up a lot because that's how I get through. But a lot of people don't. I have family members that do not. They believe in a higher power. It's not maybe not the same as me, but it at the end of the day, whenever I got sober, this is what I want the people struggling to know is like maybe you do have kids and a husband like I do, and that's how you identified yourself. But it's really, really important in my sobriety to me to my husband's always been like the provider. We had kids when I was young. We didn't want them in daycare, so I stayed home. Now I have my own job where it's important to me that I can be 100% independent. I can make it without him if I were ever to have to, like, because that's important to me. he doesn't care if I work or not. And I think that that's really important for the people out there struggling. And I know thinking about not doing something that you've done every day for probably many years, if you're in addiction, to think about going a day without it is very difficult. So to think about a lifetime is like, okay, you know? So this is what I try to tell people. And even when my daughter and I struggle, there's days like, I hate that my daughter had an addiction problem, but I'm telling you right now, I wouldn't want to do recovery with anybody else, because when I'm having trouble, I can go to her and vice versa. And I tell her, like, take the tallest, most beautiful. You see this tall, beautiful staircase, and it's magnificent. And you want to go up it. It's so inviting, but you're looking at all those steps and you're like, there's no way I'm making that. It's very important that you just don't look all the way to the top. You take one step at a time. Focus on doing this step, and then you'll focus on the next step. It's just like sobriety. You just focus on today, because in the beginning, I'm telling you, a day it seemed impossible. I made it to 7 days. I could not believe it. I couldn't. When I hit their double digits, I was like, oh my God, it's been a month I haven't had a drink, you know? And then I remember right after my 1 year clean, and I follow other people that have recovery, and it's like, you don't have to meet them in person to know them. You just feel like you know them because you follow their stuff, like, you know?
Yes.
And there's this one girl I remember, I just posted about my 1 year, and I went to her page and I'm scrolling through and I see she just had 1,000 days. And I was like, oh my God, quadruple digits. I just thought, oh my God, I wish that that was me. Like, how crazy. And I was like congratulating her and all that. And she's like, no, someday it'll be you. But I was just like, there's no way I'm ever gonna get there. Like, I'm like, I don't know. It was amazing to see it. And at the same time, I kind of felt, oh my God. But you know what? There's always gonna be people that have more recovery time than you, or sobriety time. And there's always gonna be people that have less. So you just learn from the ones that have more, and you help the ones that have less. Everybody's going to struggle. There's going to be days that you're just like, oh my gosh. And then you know what? I hit my
Everyone's
1,000 days clean. And when I posted about that, she was the first to comment. I told you would make it. I
I
told you.
love
And
that.
I couldn't believe I made it. Like, wow, I can't.
So now how many days were you sober when your daughter started using? Because it wasn't, alcohol was not her drug of choice. Meth was her drug of choice, right?
Yes, meth. And she had struggled since probably 16 or 17. So off and on, she would be in addiction, and off and on, I'd be, more on than off for both of us. And whenever she got out of that, when I called the cops on her and she went to that, like, she's been sober ever since. And the very beginning, of course, was a massive struggle. And we've been through some life-changing things. And every day, what she does as a mother, she's a single mom with 2 boys, and they're 3 and 4 years old. And just the things that my grandson Sebastian requires, he has a central line. So he lives off TPN, which sadly that ends up damaging organs and stuff. So it helps him stay alive, but at the same time,
Yes.
it's just every day, just having, I mean, as a parent, we know that's the hardest job there is. Most rewarding, but it is the hardest. And she just has so much more on her plate. And I, she's my hero. She's amazing. And I go to, ever since Sebastian was born, we lived up there 119 days, and I've never missed an appointment or anything whenever we go to St. Louis. And last March, I was talking about next month will be a year since something that happened. And last year in March, Bash had his nickname is Bash. He had a stuff come up, and we ended up being in the hospital for a long stay in St. Louis. And on day 17, I went, and I was going to go to Walgreens to pick up medicine and stuff and go to the gas station. So I didn't think nothing of it. I just went to my car, and these ladies asked if, they could get a ride to the gas station. And sadly, we've been to this hospital multiple times, emergency wise, where we had to come with nothing. Times we had no vehicle to go get anything we needed. And they asked for a ride, and I gave them a ride with me. Very nice lady, they didn't look alarming or anything. They were saying how they were going to pray for Sebastian, and we just talked like normal people. And we went to the gas station. I ran in and got drinks, and I come out, and they're outside of the car, and they're arguing that one lost their ID or whatever. And I'm just trying to help them find it. I didn't know. And they said, well, we'll just keep looking for it when we go to Walgreens, because it was just across the street. And I said, okay. They said they were going to get a ride to the gas station so they could they were going to catch a bus to go somewhere or whatever, as they'd been stuck in the hospital. And I don't know. So I go in Walgreens and I call Kelsey and I'm like, listen, my husband's always told me that your kindness is going to get you in trouble.
Yeah. Same.
And yeah, I went into Walgreens and I called Kelsey and I'm like, listen, I know you're going to be pretty mad at me, but I gave these girls a ride, but now they're kind of arguing amongst themselves. Like, I mean, I don't know that like anything's going to happen or whatever, but I just wanted you to be aware in case something does
Right.
happen. So I go in Walgreens, I pay for my stuff, and I got her on the phone. And I said, just stay on the phone with me. You know, I'm just talking to her like normal. And I go out to my car and I see it's a very busy Walgreens, tons of people everywhere. And I see one of them standing outside of the car, said she's looking for ID. And I was like, oh my gosh, have you found me yet? And she's like, no, I haven't. And I just go to open my driver door. I had tinted windows, so I couldn't see in there. And as soon as I opened the driver door, like my lanyard was ripped off my neck that had my car key on it. And the girl, I see them very plainly in my mind. I see them. And she said to me, I don't want to do this. I have to do this. And I just hollered my daughter's name. My phone went flying. So my daughter's on the phone hearing all
Not
this.
knowing what has happened to her mom.
Yes, in St. Louis. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so they knocked me to the ground. One of them stomping my head. The other one's hitting me, and I'm just swinging best I can, because at this point, like, I'm blood filled, so I can't even see anything. Like, and I hear one girl goes to the driver's side, and they're dragging me by my hair around the car to the back tires, and I see the reverse lights come on. I hear them saying, go, 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 like they're about to run me over.
Why
And
didn't they just take your car and go? Why did they
exactly.
build?
Yeah, I don't understand. Some lady, thankfully, I mean, there were people around like videoing this, like not helping. And this lady and her husband pull into Walgreens, and thankfully she just threw her car in park and came running like a crazy person, just flailing in the arms and screaming. And instead of reversing, they all hopped in the car and sped away and just left me there. And that lady, I'm telling you, she probably saved my life. They were about to back over me, but
And they ended up taking your car?
yeah.
And
Yeah.
even then, you did not go back in.
No, absolutely not. No. There's no good reason for that. There's
no good reason for that. No good. How many times
No.
have you said that? You've said, I love that you have said that so many times.
There really isn't though. Like when my son had his heart condition and he just fell over dead, like he was about to get a major surgery to get a defibrillator put in. And I said, and when he told me that about that's why people are messaging, because most people would be doing what makes them feel better.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I said, well, if you were to die and I started drinking again because of that, wouldn't you come and haunt me? And he said, you damn right I would. And I said,
the thing is,
exactly.
it wouldn't bring them back.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
And they don't want to be that excuse that you use either.
Exactly. Thank you,
They do
Heather,
not
for
want to
saying
do that.
that. Yes. Your loved ones do not want you to use them for an
No.
excuse. They
No.
want you to live in joy. They want you to be the best
Yes.
you can be.
Absolutely.
So now, real quick, I know we're almost out of time, but now your daughter, how many years sober were you when your daughter ended up going, when you called the cops on her? You were how many years sober were you?
No, I was 7 months. We had 7 months together. She relapsed, and our sobriety date, we're 10 months apart now. So I just had 7 months. She had 6. So she relapsed just a couple months. And not that there's a just in there, but
right. No.
found her way, you know.
And you're right. There's not just a just. You keep trying. You keep trying until it clicks. Are people not going to believe you? Maybe not. But you know what? Yep. You keep trying. You keep trying until it clicks.
Yes. It's a very important. And that's in sobriety, people need to know, like, yeah, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Absolutely not. It's still life. You know, shit still happens.
You know, I always say I do something called soul plans, which, you know, talks about your innate challenges and talents that you come to this earth with. No one gets a free ride, no matter how pretty someone's life looks like on the outside.
Yeah,
no one gets a free ride.
Yeah, I had a lady tell me the other day, like, oh my god, you like live the American dream. And I laughed, and she's like, what? But you do, you got your husband and your kids. And it's like, and I said, but you also see all the bad stuff because I have lots of family that live out of state. So on my Facebook page, it's literally like the things we do as a family, like that's how we keep in contact. And some people look at social media like, oh my gosh, but it, like life is what you make it. There's a lot of people going on there
Absolutely.
just trying to down people. And I don't see the point in that. We want the world to be a better place. So let's help make others better. Like
Start
be
with
kind,
yourself.
I
Right,
just don't
right. Be
understand.
kind.
So
Be
in
kind.
recovery, they call me the silver lining girl because they say no matter what situation you have, there's something positive. And when
Absolutely.
my son just killed over like that, oh, I was pissed. I was like, what is going on? But there's going to be a silver lining. It took me a long time to find it. And it was not long after my son's accident that my dad just killed over. My mom calls me 140. It says, I went downstairs and your dad's gone. And, it's just crazy how these things work. And my son just kills over like that. My uncle killed over like that. Luckily, they saved my son. And we found out the silver lining was we found out it's genetic. And he probably saved his little brother's life because my youngest son also has it. And now he takes beta blockers, goes to the cardiologist. There's always a silver lining, like
Yes.
it's so easy for people in life to notice the negative. I could sit here and compliment you probably 20 times, but I could say something rude and you're going to focus on the rude thing. You know what
You're
I mean?
right. You're
That's
right.
just the
You're
things that
absolutely
people do.
right, Heather. You are so right because you can
Yeah.
imagine sometimes my business,
Yeah.
people want to judge it, not really understanding the love
Yeah.
vibration that I come at. I can have I have so many people every day messaging me saying what a difference I've made in their life, how much they
Yeah.
appreciate my vibration. But you're right, that it's that one person
Yeah.
that
And it
you
seems to
focus
just
on.
sit there with you. Yeah, exactly. And I tell people instead of like, obviously you're going to notice the negative things, but if you look close enough, there is something positive. Like,
Yes.
it's very important. If we just sit here and focus on all the negative, you think I like the fact that my boys have this heart condition? Do you think that I like the fact that my grandson has a numbered days? Yeah, I know, absolutely not. But I'm not going to sit around dwelling on it. Today, I'm going to make their life the best I can possibly make it. And they're going to know that Nana loves them and that their mom loves them. And that's what's important at the end of the day. And then tomorrow, we're going to work on that again. If we get up tomorrow, because you know what? Tonight, you may close your eyes and you may not open them. So you remember to make sure the people that you love know you love them. You be the best you can be, and it doesn't matter. There's always going to be haters doubting you, whatever. But between you and the good Lord knows the truth. So it doesn't matter what all these haters think. They're there trying to bring you down because they haven't made it to where you're at. And anybody can
That,
get exactly where I'm at.
thank you, Heather. That's beautiful. I love that. And I'm going to leave you with some of my favorite words from Heather. There's just no good excuse for that. There's just no good excuse for going back to your addiction. And you just keep trying. Find a mentor because you mentioned that, you said you'll look to people that have been sober longer than you to still help you. And then you help those that haven't been sober as long. Find a mentor and find your way to do it. And find yourself, find the beauty within. The beauty
Yes.
within. Thank you so much for being here, Heather. Thank you for talking about your story. I know that it's brave. It's brave to put yourself out like that. And I so appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
No, thank you for having me. I'm honored.
No, I hope everyone has a wonderful, blessed day. And thank you for spending some time with me and Heather today.